Formula One. 5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
What an entertaining qualifying session we have just had in Melbourne for the third round of the Formula One World Championship. Max Verstappen will be starting on pole position. Then it's the two Mercedes of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso fourth. The Ferraris only fifth and seventh. Sergio Perez starting at the back. Plenty to dissect here on the Checkered Flag podcast. I'm Jack Nichols. With us this weekend we have Jack Aitken, the former Williams reserve driver, and also Rosanna Tennant. And Jack, pole position for Max Verstappen. He seemed quite happy about it afterwards, didn't he? He thought it was a pretty good lap.
He's just a happy guy in general at the moment. You would be if you were...
I'm not sure he was after Saudi Arabia, but yeah.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But, I mean, no, he did seem pleased. It's been a pretty smooth weekend for them on their side of the garage. He's not made hardly any mistakes, just the one in, I think it was at Q2. He went slightly wide at turn 13. That's the only thing that I've picked up on. He's just looked pretty happy pushing the car, and yeah.
And he kind of had it all to do on that final lap, didn't he? Because Hamilton was on provisional pole position.
Yeah, he still had to get the job done. You know, he couldn't rest on his laurels, and it was a good lap. I mean, when he put the lap in, it was half a second up on P2. They did whittle that down when the Mercedes put their next laps in, but still 2 tenths clear. And yeah, it was I think probably just the right amount of hard work for him. Wasn't so easy that he's like, yeah, whatever. But he had to work for it a little bit.
It wasn't that easy, was it, Rosanna? It was a lot tighter than I think we maybe were expecting, and tighter with different people.
Yeah, definitely a battle with the Mercedes this time round, where I think people were probably expecting it to be Aston Martin or Ferrari. But Max was still struggling with the downshift, so it's not all easy breezy, but I think he's just chasing perfection. Does it exist? Maybe we'll find out in 2023.
Well, let's hear from the pole sitter ahead of the Grand Prix.
Max, congratulations. It is sort of almost worrying that you're still struggling with things and yet you're just putting it on pole. How easy or difficult is it really behind the scenes?
It's just constantly fine-tuning things. I always want things to be perfect, even though I know that it's almost impossible. But there are no concerns. It's just, you always try to find more performance.
And in terms of your race car, I imagine you're feeling fairly confident going into Sunday as well?
Normally, yes. I mean, it's a little bit of a question mark with the behavior of the tarmac around here with the tyres, but overall I think we should have a strong car, yeah.
So Verstappen on pole, he had a big smile on his face, basically, as after qualifying, as you'd expect. But it was I don't know if it was a relief or something. But Rosanna, he did seem quite chirpy, I thought.
Yeah, pretty chirpy, and I have to say, coming into this weekend, he's been very honest about how ill he was in Saudi Arabia, going as far as saying he felt like he almost had one lung, fairly severe, and there was like a little bit of gossip here and there that perhaps it would mean Daniel Ricciardo, the home hero, would get a go in the Red Bull if Max wasn't up to it. I think he is. I think he's fine, and I think he's probably fairly thrilled that his teammate Checo Perez didn't make it through to Q3, let alone Q2, Jack.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the biggest thing as far as the championship is concerned. Sergio Perez had an unbelievably bad day. Christian Horner kind of almost not exactly laughed about it afterwards, but
dropped
was like
him in it a bit, didn't he?
Well,
he wasn't very supportive.
Yeah, because Perez has come out and sort of said, there's an issue or whatever. But Horner didn't seem to buy that necessarily. He said they would look into things,
there
but...
are 2 different party lines coming out there. I mean, Checo was looking pretty stormy afterwards and complaining about an issue both in the car on the radio and then again in the interview afterwards. And meanwhile, Christian was suggesting that he'd maybe gone in a bit too hard on an inconsequential lap and saying, of course we'll look at the data, and if there is a problem, we'll of course fix that for Sunday. But it was all slightly veiled that it was maybe Checo's fault.
Checo said he couldn't go into it, so there's obviously something afoot.
Yeah, let's hear what he had to say, Sergio Perez.
Yeah, it's really hard to digest this one, to end up qualifying on the second braking zone. It's really disappointing, but nothing I can do now. I gotta look forward, and I really hope we are able to fix the technical issue for tomorrow, because otherwise it will be really hard to race like this.
In the morning session, we saw the mechanics working at the back of your car. Was it something to do with the anti-roll bar, and is it something that's also played a part in your
No,
qualifying?
it's nothing to do with that. It's another issue that we cannot go too much in detail, but we have a good idea on what it is.
Is it something that's solvable overnight so that you can race?
Yeah, we are confident we can solve the issue tomorrow.
Okay, so you're going to be fighting for the win tomorrow, a podium, points? Where are you going to be?
I just hope I'm able to minimize the damage and get some good points tomorrow.
So as you say, Rosanna, it was all very, oh no, I'm not going to say what the problem is. So which is weird, because you thought he'd at least say, oh, it's a electrical problem or struggling with the brakes, or you'd think you'd give something, or anything.
Or, yeah, at least come up with a line. Just tell us something.
Yeah.
I'll buy a lie, whatever you like. But I think also I was watching Checo watch Max in the final part of qualifying, and I have to say, yeah, stormy. That's the right kind of phrase, Jack Aitken. He did not look impressed, as Max was kind of half a second ahead at that point in qualifying. Checo, this is huge. This is a massive amount of championship points that he has potentially left behind already in Australia.
We came into this weekend. Well, there was a lot of discussion on the podcast last week after Saudi Arabia. Is Sergio Perez in title contention? You have to say, factually, he is, because he's 1 point off the top of Verstappen. But I feel like for Perez, he needs a season where everything goes his way, right? If he's in order to fight for the title, kind of like Nico Rosberg in 2016. And whether it's driver, whether it's team, whether it's whatever.
Reliability.
This is not the way, Jack, for it to start. Only the third race, because as soon as he drops, for me personally, if he can stay with Max in the points for the first half of the season or something like that, then maybe. But as soon as he kind of drops a chunk back, that's when I think he's going to be in trouble as far as the title's concerned.
Yeah, it certainly will create a different dynamic in the team, because although I find it hard to believe that he's going to be able to challenge Max come the end of the year. As you're right, that as long as he can stay within touching distance or even on the same level as him points-wise relatively, it's just that little bit harder for Red Bull to take those decisions either strategically or when it comes to parts or any kind of natural leaning towards one side of the garage. If he keeps putting his name up there on the timesheets next to Verstappen's and occasionally ahead, then he'll benefit from that in the garage.
Rosanna, it was just a weirdly bad day. I think that's what I can't get over. So many mistakes or errors or problems, whatever, in FP3, and I was literally just in the middle of telling the listeners the story of his terrible FP3 when cut to Checo in the gravel and beached. It was quite remarkable, to be honest.
Yeah, a catalogue of errors. And I think in the build-up to this race, people have been billing Checo as king of the streets. And, Albert Park Circuit is a street circuit. We're then going to Baku. That's a street circuit. We've got Monaco. It's a street circuit. We've got Canada. It's a street. And people kind of writing the story of the championship, kind of saying, oh, look, Checo, you could actually be out in front come kind of mid-season. And suddenly this happens. And you just wonder, it's these little moments that just can upset the momentum, which everyone was thinking Checo had coming into Australia off the back of his win in Saudi.
The thing I struggle with, Jack, is that every single one of the Perez errors just looked like driver error. It just looks like a regular driver error. And any one of those, if they were the only thing that happened all weekend, you'd be like, okay, yeah, Perez went in a bit deep that time, or Perez did this. But when you put them all together, it just doesn't seem believable that Perez is just over driving, so ends up in the gravel 4 times.
No, I've got zero belief that it's pure driver error. Like you say, when you have that kind of a mistake 6-7 times across 2 sessions, then many of them at the same corners, then it just can't be. At this level, you don't get that. And Checo is a completely competent driver, so it's just a question of whether it's a reliability issue that they really don't understand, can't get to the bottom of. There's something a bit peculiar going on under the braking system of that car, or is it a setup issue? Is it something that Checo is saying it's an issue and it's making me feel uncomfortable and it's not doing what I expect it to, and the team are saying, oh, sorry mate, that's just how the car is at the moment, that's what Max is driving, that's what we think is right. And that might be where some of the difference between Checo's line and Christian's line is coming from.
Yeah, very interesting.
New chassis?
Yeah,
Do you think we'll get a new chassis for the next race, a few weeks' time?
Yeah, a classic. Have you ever demanded a new chassis, Jack?
I am ashamed to say that yes, in my youthful days
Did it
of
work?
single-seaters, no. I actually found one of the biggest successes of my career in junior single-seaters came on a cracked chassis. So there you go, kids.
Really?
Just don't worry about it too much.
If it's broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Guys, can you crack my chassis for me?
Yeah, that'll be the next big thing now. People going out with hammers and chisels. Oh, God.
Right, well, Verstappen on pole, Perez at the back. Interested to... Okay, where do we think... give me a result for Perez at the end of the race. Rosanna?
Oh, do you know what? I pushed him on this in the pen. What are you fighting for? Win, podium points. He looked pretty, just disgruntled. I'm going to say he'll get into the points. It's going to be tricky to overtake here. So many drivers saying it's going to be impossible, even though we've got this 4th DRS zone. So I'm going to say 8th, 9th.
He did look ready to bite your head off at any opportunity, Rosanna, so I don't blame you for not pushing that one any further. I had the number 6 in my head, just because I can see him. I don't think he'll get much trouble from the second half of that top 10, the likes of Albon, Gasly, Hülkenberg. It should be relatively straightforward, even if it's a harder circuit to get past. But once he gets towards the Astons, especially, who have got such a straight line. No, sorry, it's the other way around, isn't it? They're slow and straight. Never mind. I think about 6th.
Yeah, okay. 6 is positive. Okay, I'm going to go with... I can't quite decide. I'll split the difference and go 7th. But I think it could be either way. I think it could be... I feel like it could be 4th or 11th and doesn't make the points. You know what I mean? It's one of those to my mind. So we'll see what Perez can do. We did these predictions. I will absolutely forget to pay it off tomorrow in the podcast, but give me a reminder if I do forget. So behind Verstappen are the 2 Mercedes drivers. Let's hear from them. We'll hear from them both, starting with George Russell.
George, congratulations. You said the car feels alive. Is that the first time it's felt like that since you joined Mercedes?
If I'm being honest, no, because the feeling of the car has not been the problem this year. The problem has been just the lack of downforce. So when you drive it, it feels pretty good. It's not the diva it was of 2022. Sorry, W13 2022. The balance feels good. I feel comfortable driving it, but we just don't have the downforce that we need at the moment, and we know that we've going to be making a big step in the near future. So yeah, things are looking promising, no doubt.
I've been told if I look really closely I might see a tiny upgrade. Has that made the difference this weekend?
No, it hasn't. Minimal, absolutely minimal. It's I don't think we'd even define it as an upgrade, to be honest. So I think what's made the difference is hard work, people understanding the car better and better week in, week out, getting the tyres in the right window and putting the lap together, and the lap felt great. Really happy with the lap we produced. My Q3 run 1 I was pretty disappointed with because I lost 2.5 tenths in the last 3 corners. I made a bit of a mistake. So when I saw Lewis was P1 and I did the same time as him, I was like, sugar, do we have the car for pole position here? Fortunately I got the second chance, put the lap together, but ultimately Max was just too quick today.
Sugar, you're so polite, George. And just finally, what sort of setup are you guys running? Are you similar today, or have you gone in a different direction?
I don't know. We got lucky.
Lewis, congratulations. You sound like you're pumped up and ready for this. Especially...
I am. I've been training, just being ready for a day that this sort of day to come. So I was hopeful that I could get pole at the end. After that first lap, I knew there was more time in the car, and oh God, I was so hopeful that maybe we could just squeeze a little bit more out, but just wasn't meant to be.
Do you know what's changed? Because so often in Formula One, you need to know whether it's going well for a reason or badly for a reason. And can you replicate what you've done today, do you think, now?
I think so. I mean, we didn't expect, through practice, we didn't have this pace. So this is a real shock to us. I don't think we understand why, but the car came together, was alive in qualifying, and I just think we did a solid job. Hard to explain it. So we haven't brought upgrades or anything just yet. but still we're just tinkering and trying to extract more and more and understand the car and the package we have. And I think the colder conditions maybe worked quite well for us. So I mean, I hope that our race pace is good tomorrow.
Good luck.
So first Russell, then Hamilton, and that's the order they will start on the grid. Russell second, Hamilton third. Rosanna, they all just seemed a bit flabbergasted, really, to be that close to Verstappen. OK, still a couple of tenths away, but second and third on the grid was not... In fact, yesterday, after free practice, they both predicted fifth, sixth on the grid would be what they were fighting for.
Yeah, I'm not sure they were even lowballing it. I think that is genuinely what they thought. But honestly, George Russell looked like a kid in a candy store. He had a smile across his face, kind of trying to hide it in kind of George Russell style. But so thrilled, and both drivers using that adjective alive to talk about the W14 car. Both of them really, really pumped up for what's to come tomorrow. And I did like George Russell's sort of tongue-in-cheek little poke at perhaps Lewis, saying, you know, it was just luck that he'd got a good setup. But who knows? I wonder which direction both of them went in.
Yeah, because there was quite a bit of difference in last time out in Saudi Arabia. But Russell out-qualifying Hamilton only by a fraction of a second. What was it? About 300ths between them. So,
but that's 3-0, Jack.
Is that 3-0 now, is it? Yeah. That's true. 3-0.
Lewis leads in the championship, but yeah, 3-0.
It was a trend that you sort of started to see it last year, or at least I felt like it. I can't remember what the numbers said in terms of the quali battle between the pair of them. But George is good at quali, and he's finally maybe shaken off the Mr. Saturday tag, but it's definitely something that he's got a strength in. And Lewis is, he doesn't seem hugely bothered by it, but I mean, he's got to be thinking that he's maybe missing something and he needs to, I don't know, study George's data a little bit harder, dare I say.
Lewis hasn't done any long runs. That's what he was really keen to tell everybody after qualifying. So there's a bit of an unknown for Lewis going into tomorrow. Maybe that's an unknown for everyone, given the sort of weird running we've had in the lead up to qualifying. But I worry, and Jack Aitken, you alluded to it during commentary, that if you don't know why you've made a step on, you can't replicate it. And that's not a great position to be in. Yes, it looks great on the timing sheets, but what happens from now on?
That's the question. What can they do tomorrow? Hamilton said, try and sort of give them a bit of a run for their money, which was the sort of least committal fighting for the win thing. But he did say his aim is to win.
Yeah, I mean, the major thing they've got in their favour is numbers. So if there's anything interesting that's going to happen tomorrow in terms of strategy, which, as you say, Rosanna, there are some unanswered questions, I think, up and down the pit lane, because even the guys that did do a long run, it was cut short by that red flag in FP2. If there's anything interesting with strategy, Mercedes can use Russell and Hamilton and play them off each other and double up against Verstappen. So they have something there, but yeah, pace-wise, it's going to be very difficult, I think.
Christian Horner was very proud of the fact that they've got 2 new sets of hard tyres for the Grand Prix tomorrow. But considering the weather we've seen, it's meant to be a bit warmer tomorrow, up to 19 degrees potentially by the... Well, no, but then it'll be dropping in the evening. According to the internet, it'll be about 15, 16 degrees by the time the race gets underway. So all we've seen today is you can't warm the tyres up, and the softs last forever. So I'm not sure why you'd be so excited about having new sets of hards.
Maybe Perez is going to do a long stint on the hards like Albon did last year and just run right to the checkered.
Yeah, that's very true. Or like Perez did himself. 2012, I think he started something like 15th on the grid and finished 8th in the Sauber because he just looked after his tyres the whole time.
Why would you need 2 sets?
Well, yeah, true, very true.
He seemed very proud, like you say, very proud of that fact. The only thing I would say is that during practice, we did see a few people playing with the hard and not looking too slow. So it does seem like it's a compound that works on this track. But yeah, no real long run pace to speak of, to analyse. I'm just going off the fact that in FP1 a few people did have to do their laps on the hard compound and it was okay.
Yeah, well, we will see what Mercedes can do in the fight, and I think maybe the more interesting fight will be the Mercedes versus the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, because Alonso's 4th on the grid. Wasn't sure whether he'd be happy with that, Rosanna, or slightly disappointed, considering maybe he should have been second? What was his vibe?
He was in good spirits, and I think he's actually just happy to be right up at the front end of the grid. I think there will probably come a time where he's then expecting to be there, and I think when that shift happens, maybe we'll start to see disappointment on Fernando's face after qualifying. But he's still kind of, in good spirits. It was actually a really positive media pen. How about that?
Yeah, that's true. Well,
Only 3 races in.
Yeah, once Perez had left. Anyway. Yeah, Alonso fourth on the grid. He's going to be in the fight with the Mercedes for sure.
Yep, yeah, and I'm still a little bit finding it hard to pin down exactly how quick the Aston is this weekend, because they looked very strong early on in the weekend and then didn't quite live up to it as much as I expected in Q3 especially. But they're both kind of there, 4th and 6th for Alonso and Stroll respectively, and long run pace generally has been good in the first 2 rounds this year, even if we didn't see much of it on Friday this weekend, so you can expect them to be up there.
Fernando's so clever, Jack. He literally already in the media pen was like, yeah, because I was 6 tenths off in Bahrain, I was 5 tenths off in Saudi, and I was 4 tenths off today. Like already just kind of knowing where they're kind of fitting in. He's such a savvy driver, knows where he is, but knows where everyone else is on the grid as well.
Yeah, smart guy. We'll see where he can get himself tomorrow in the Grand Prix. Most likely, I would suggest, ahead of the Ferraris, 5th and 7th for Sainz and Leclerc. And Leclerc looked like he kind of came alive a little bit in Q2. I thought, oh, okay, here we go. They've had the engine turned down. Now they're here, and he'll be fighting at the front. In fact, Leclerc expected to be to qualify at the front and maybe struggle in the race, but 7th on the grid.
Yeah, it's been a difficult weekend for them. The car has looked a little bit tricky to drive. And we were wondering earlier if the unique nature of this circuit, even compared to other street tracks, with its very smooth surface, it's very difficult to warm up the tyre and get it to work. Is that playing against Ferrari, perhaps? But these flashes of pace that Leclerc and Ferrari have had have been sort of surrounded by mediocrity, and most of the time they've not seemed that happy. So. Yeah, Sainz did a good job, but just 1.5 tenths or less, 1/10 ahead of his teammate Leclerc. So they're pretty close, the pair of them, maximising what they've got.
Jack, I have to say, after yesterday's running, Carlos Sainz said, I'm hoping to play with the Red Bulls in qualifying. Obviously, that did not happen. Charles Leclerc, whilst I said it was a kind of jolly media pen, Charles was not happy. He said he was put out behind Carlos. He needs to discuss that with the team. And I think it was not a good qualifying session for him. Obviously, it doesn't look like a good qualifying session on paper, but I'd like to know what's going on behind the scenes right now as Ferrari discuss some of their placements with the drivers and managing how they kind of went about qualifying.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing for Leclerc to be a bit annoyed about.
It's quite early in the season to be moaning about which order you have sent out in quali, isn't it?
Especially at a non-slipstreaming circuit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So 5th and 7th for the Ferraris. 3 tenths in the end away from Russell. So they were a long way, and 4 tenths for Leclerc, a long way adrift from the front row of the grid. Hulkenberg did a good job in 8th position in the Haas, 9th for Pierre Gasly, 10th on the grid, Alex Albon, and he was delighted with that, as you would expect. His teammate Logan Sargent down in 18th place, but they always have they're such a circuit-specific team, Williams, and I always think this with Nick de Vries, right? If Albon had his appendicitis at, I don't know, 3/4 of the other tracks last year, De Vries wouldn't be in Formula One, because he would have turned up and finished 19th, and everyone would have been like, yeah, De Vries is fine. But because it was Monza, and that's where he gets his go, and suddenly he's a hero for finishing in the points, because it was one of those 3 or 4 on the track where Williams are mega for some reason.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, we heard in an interview earlier, Albon was talking about that a little bit, of how their car is quite specific, and in particular they seem to work the tyres quite a bit harder than most of the other cars around them. So they're generating a lot of surface temperature on the tyre, which usually is a really not a desirable feature in a car, because you've got so much temperature running through these tyres as it is. You just want to minimise it basically and get as much life out of them as you can. it's quite rare that warm-up is an issue, as it is this weekend, and that's obviously playing to them, and that's why I think they're able to extract a little bit more out of the car. It's a shame that Logan isn't at the same level at the moment. He's, first time at this track, and it is a street track, so there's a bit of a learning curve there. But yeah, he's had a bit of a disappointing session in contrast to Albon getting through to Q3.
10th on the grid then for Alex Albon. The only other real, notable issue is the McLarens, really. Norris 13th, Piastri 16th. A shame for Piastri his home race, but equally there's not really much to say about the McLarens a little bit. They've got a bad car.
Yeah, it's just continuing on the same theme, and I mean, there's been mixed messages coming out of the McLaren camp. Some talk about a B-spec car, some not. Some people saying, it's not as bad as you think. I think it was Lando was saying, what, all these headlines saying we're in trouble is over-egging it a bit. And then Zach Brown in a corporate session earlier in the weekend said, yeah, we're in the beep. So,
I think Lando's finding it really difficult. He says he's having to sort of drive at 95%. And Jack, I don't know how you actually manage that. He says it's just very easy to overdrive the car. So, yeah, not great when you can't fully lean on it, I imagine.
No, it's a pretty horrible feeling. And he's probably, that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because the car is unpredictable, which is the worst thing that you can have as a driver. And you have to leave that margin because, if you get close to the limit, it could snap on you at any time. It could be just because the car is lacking a bit of support in the rear, and as soon as you start to ask a bit more and overdrive it, it is usually in the entries in the rear that you start to get those snaps coming in, which is pretty nasty as well. But it's not a nice feeling, and if he's 13th, feeling like he's done a pretty good lap, that he sounded pretty dejected on the radio when he was doing his in-lap.
Yeah, Valtteri Bottas said similar, actually. I got everything out of the car, but he ended up last on the grid, 2/10 slower than his teammate Zhou Guanyu, who's 17th, so tough day for the Alfa Romeo squad. Right, that's it then. Verstappen will be starting on pole position. The two Mercedes will be right behind him. It's going to be Melbourne always throws something up. Well, no. Melbourne quite often throws something up, so we'll see what we get in the Grand Prix tomorrow. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. You can listen to commentary if you're in the UK on BBC Radio 5 Live at 6 o'clock in the morning. The race gets underway, and then we'll be back with the Chequered Flag podcast, where we'll bring you all the reaction. Thank you for joining us, and Verstappen will be on pole position for the third race of the season. Perez at the back. What can he do carving through the field?